Hi, 8th grade. Miss Boyd here. So, I'm going to be reviewing through your Anne Frank test. So, please make sure that if you haven't finished reading the rest of the play, that you've done so. You've got your test coming up Wednesday. So, I'm going to go through some bullet points and things like that. Remember, it's a video. So, if you need to pause it to write some things down, you can do so. And then remember, if you're going through this video and I talk about something and you're unsure of it, just send me an email or a text message and I'll get back with you. So I'm going to start with the page. Well, it was a couple of pages, a handout that we took notes over in class. So you turned them in, I gave them back to you, and then just to make sure we had everything that we needed, I went back through them and we did that as a class together. So if you see me look down, I'm looking at the test just so I can make sure I go over everything that you need, okay? So I'm going to start with your notes. So the first 2 pages that you took were over drama terms. So I told you at the beginning to make sure you write down the people that are involved in a play. Are you going to have to know all of them? No. At least be able to list me 3 of those, okay? And then you also had the basic dramatic principles. So you need to make sure you know them and make sure you know them in order, okay? You also had a certain term that was the contrast between expectation and reality. So you had 2 terms, that one being irony, and you also need to know dramatic irony. You should have both of those written down, okay? And then the next 2 pages in your notes dealt with some history over Anne Frank. So you want to make sure you know where and when she was born, and you need to make sure you remember how old she was when her diary started, okay? We also have the section that detailed some of the laws that were put into place, things that they couldn't do. For example, like wearing the Star of David, no bicycles, only going to Jewish schools, only being able to shop at Jewish stores and things like that, from only going to certain movie theaters to the curfew, okay? There's a lot of them. Be able to list me at least 3 of those, okay? And then it focuses in on the place they were in hiding. Make sure you know how many people were in hiding and what the play was called. It had a certain name, hint, hint. And then also make sure you can tell me the attic that they were staying in, what was it above, okay? And as far as their hiding place where they were hiding, make sure you know when they were discovered, the year that they were discovered. It didn't give you a day, okay? But what year were they discovered in? It was in August, okay? And make sure you know out of your group who survives. There's only one. And then as far as Anne Frank, we also talked about in class, how old was she when she died? And we had the term flashback and extended flashback. Make sure you're comfortable with those, okay? So that's your notes section. Now, the next thing you have, we'll go through the play itself. It's broken down into, the first section is labeled Act 1, Scenes 1 through 3, okay? So just the beginning. So you always know it's a test question. Make sure you know your authors, okay? And then your first scene is in the present. So there were 2 items that Mr. Frank picks up. Not the diary. This is before the diary, okay? There are 2 things that he picks up. Make sure you know those 2 things, okay? And then once he picks up those 2 things, we know Meat comes in and she presents him with the diary. And our flashback starts as he opens the diary and he begins to read. So, in that section, beginning our flashback, okay, we see them in the secret annex, and I talked about When people are scared, they hold things that are most dear to them. So remember, what was Mr. Van Daan doing? Pacing and doing something he holds dear. What is Mrs. Van Daan clutching to? What does she hold most dear? And then what does Peter have in his carrying case? Hint, hint. Okay, that he has brought with him as something to comfort him from home. And as they get there, they're carrying most of their things either in a case, like we have Peter's cat, but for them to have clothing, tell me how, or make sure you know how they get all their clothing with them, okay? And as they get into hiding, they have their a few things brought to them by Meep and Mr. Crawler, but they also have certain rules that they have to follow. Be able to give me at least 2 of those rules that they have to follow. In that first scene, we also see Anne get her diary. Make sure you can tell me who gives her the diary. And then we have that section with the Star of David with Peter and with Anne. And I told you, make sure you know the difference between what that star represents for Anne and then what that star represents for Peter. Okay? As far as the personalities, you have lots of different conflict between personalities. So make sure you can tell me your characters' personalities and which characters have conflict. It doesn't take very long to figure out some of those. Okay? And as far as Anne and her sister, why does Anne get in so much more trouble than Margaret? Okay. We also have tension between Anne and Peter. They don't necessarily get along. Make sure you can tell me why that is. And as far as Anne, I mean, she's the central character. She clashes with it's like almost everybody, except for whom? Who does she have a really tight-knit relationship with? Okay. And I told you would have a test question about the moment Anne realizes what going into hiding truly means. What scene is that? Okay, there's a specific moment where she realizes how serious going into hiding is. Like, she cannot go beyond that door, what it means. Okay. And as far as the first section, Act 1, scenes 1 through 3, that covers that. So we're going into Act 1, scenes 4 and 5. So this is the section that starts with Anne having her nightmare. She's screaming, okay? And you have this pivotal moment after she wakes up from her nightmare because she doesn't want her mother and she wants her father. And we all know she doesn't mean to be harsh with her mother, but she is. And so with her discussion with her father, you see Anne start to change. Tell me how, and make sure you can tell me how she changes in that moment when she's talking with her father. Okay? So we have that scene. Make sure you know that. And then we have the scene 5 is all about Hanukkah. So make sure you can tell me which of your characters is not a practicing Jew. There's only one. And then we also see in this Christmas scene a change in Anne, and she's physically trying to show this to everyone. So what does she do? That kind of shows people she's thinking about others rather than herself. And we have this joyous Hanukkah celebration. They're excited. They're lighting the candles. And then we have this exciting scene go to a moment of panic. Okay, the lampshade crashes, the footsteps below of the thief, and you see almost a moment where people turn on each other. You see Mr. Van Daan almost turn on his own son because of the lampshade, and you have one character who tries to bring the group back to the fact that they're still alive in a situation where they could not be, and to make sure that they always look in the positive and that God has spared them and that God will continue to protect them. So who is that individual? And he's not hard to figure out because he is the one that leads all of them in the secret annex as far as being on the positive side and being the individual who tries to be a mediator at times. Okay, so Act 2. So we have lots of conflict in Act 2. So Mr. Van Daan decides to sell something of his wife's. What is that? And what does he want to use that money for? It's something he holds dear to himself. And we also find out there's some problems going on with Mr. Crawler, why he's not visiting, what happened to Mr. Crawler, why is he in the hospital, and why can he not come and visit? What's happening with that? Okay. And we also have the issue of blackmail. Okay, or is it blackmail? They're unsure. So Mr. Frank comes up with a way to see if it's really blackmail or not. What, I guess, method does he give to Mr. Crawler to figure out if the man downstairs is really blackmailing them or not? Some other things you see in here. There's so many conflicts in Act 2. You see Anne and Peter's relationship start to develop, which is a positive, but there's one individual in the secret annex that has a problem with it. And who is that? She kind of fusses that Anne goes to visit Peter all of the time. And we also have a conflict that is foreshadowed beforehand. Mr. Van Daan sneaking down and getting food. And you see the huge blow up, absolutely huge blow up with Mrs. Frank, the one who's held her tongue or, has bitten her tongue in more ways than one in multiple scenes. And she absolutely loses it with Mr. Van Daan stealing food when he gets busted. Because at first, they just think it's the rats. But when they catch him, for her, that's it. He's done. He's kicked out of the secret annex. Get out. Okay? Can't be trusted. And he's no father because he's stealing. For her, it's not that he's stealing just food in general. It's he's stealing food that the kids should have. That's her button that just pushes her over the edge. So you have that scene where they completely blow up at one another. He's leaving. If he goes, then I go. Peter says that about his father. Anne says if Peter leaves, then she's leaving. And she says none of the children are leaving. It's just him. So you have this huge blow up. Okay? So make sure you understand that scene extremely well. And in the midst of that tense scene, Meep arrives with great news, right? So the Allies are coming. They've landed, Normandy, D-Day. And in that moment, they realize, or especially Mrs. Frank, and you have kind of their reactions where just about everybody breaks down into tears and they realize that the stealing of the food and kicking people out, it's not what's important. And they all take back what they've done. And they realize that staying together and getting out of the secret annex is what's most important. And then you have towards the end where Meep hasn't come to visit. She's been missing quite a while. How long has she been missing? And they keep hearing something downstairs. What is it that they hear? There's something that they hear, okay? And Meep is missing, and she'd been gone several days, and I want you to be able to tell me why. Why had she not come to the secret annex, okay? There's a certain reason why, okay? Because remember, where they got the ration books, where they get their food, that man had been arrested and caught. So, hint, hint, she had was trying to find some food somewhere, okay? Hint, some kind of resolve as far as the ration books being missing. And then we have them being found, the Green Police, okay? So remember with the lampshade, the thief downstairs stealing the radio and all of that. who alerts the green police to the individuals hiding upstairs in the secret annex. And then the very last little bit, you have the dramatic scene where they have to pick up their things. And you read that last little line with Anne Frank in her diary, and she says, despite of everything, I still believe that there is good in people, okay? That despite it all, there are still good things and good people out there. That's how Anne ends this whole situation. That's how her diary ends, because you have that scene with her and Peter where Peter's like, he doesn't see the good. He doesn't see hope. And Anne looks at him, and this is where the Star of David comes in, and Peter has no faith. Nothing that he can put his hope and faith in. No God, nothing. No relationship with God. And Anne has that. And that's why Peter can't see past the evil that people do. He can't understand, and all he can see is the negative. And for Anne, she has that relationship with God. And for her, she chooses joy. I mean, it's kind of like we have to do now. You choose joy because of her faith in God. And that's why she ends her diary with that. That's kind of the last thing you read. And that's why when Mr. Frank shuts that diary, because remember, now the flashback's over, we're back to the bitter Mr. Frank. And that's why he says, she puts me to shame. Because in that moment, with everything, everything's gone and everyone he loves gone, he finds it very hard to choose joy and to see the good. Okay? So that's where when he closes and finishes that diary, remember, that last scene is where that extended flashback, we're back at the present. Okay? And that is your Anne Frank test. So make sure, again, conflict is really important. Who has conflicts with one another? Are they resolved? And then your characters, we talked about this as we read. Who changes, who evolves as a character, and who doesn't, okay? And if they do change, be able or be prepared to give me some examples of how they change. And that is your Anne Frank review. Again, if there's something you're unsure of, send me a message. This test will be Wednesday. Hopefully Net Classroom and the emails will be up. If the emails are up, I'll send it out to all of you students. And then students, if you're not getting emails, I'll also post this like I did with the quiz. I'll post it in a document on there so you can copy and paste the URL and go straight to your test. Okay? Again, please don't hesitate to let me know if you have any questions about the information covered in this video. Thanks.